Hi, folks. This is Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz. I'm here to give the master class on Purim. Saturday night is Purim, and Purim is actually, people don't realize that Purim is actually one of the most important holidays of the Jewish year. There's a saying that you have uh, Purim and you have Yom Kippur or Yom Kippurim. Ki in Hebrew is a prefix that means it's like. So Yom Kippur is like Purim, meaning Purim is the real deal, and Yom Kippur is a knockoff. It's a near copy. I'm going to start out. I want to give some basics. I've only learned in yeshiva, so I'm going to be learning the way they learn in yeshiva, very classical, very straightforward, the way they learn in yeshiva. I'd like to dedicate this learning to the sanctification of those murdered by Hamas or the Hamans of today, for those who were injured, for the soldiers wounded and killed for the sake of Israel, and may God avenge their blood soon. So this is a classical Jewish approach. If you have any questions, you can text Suzanne through the chat. She'll forward it to me because I'm actually not looking at the screen right now. I'm looking at my notes. And also, if you have any preferences of what you want to learn, I'll be happy to hear that. I'll be happy to teach anything you'd like to know about. Next week is Parshas Para, which is about the red heifer. And I happen to have had personal experience and was in the airport watching 5 red heifers land in Israel about a year and a half ago. And God willing, next week I'm going to go out and visit them in Shiloh. So I have a personal attachment to that Parsha. We'll be offering classes for free for the first couple of weeks, for the first 3 weeks. And after that, we have a very nice subscription plan with different levels. You can find the one that suits you the best. So let's start off the basics of Purim. Everyone knows Purim is a Jewish holiday. It commemorates the saving of the Jewish people from annihilation at the hands of an official in the Achaemenid Empire who was named Haman. This is all related in the book of Esther. Haman is an Agagite who is descended from the Amalekites, the perennial enemies of Israel that we are required to destroy. And Haman is actually a descendant of Agag, who Shaul did not kill him along with the other Amalekites. And because of the one night that he was permitted to live by Shaul, well, he was able to produce offspring, and that led us to Haman. So that one act of misguided mercy towards an Amalekite king, led to all of the Jews of Persia being threatened. And he was the vizier, the royal vizier to the Persian king Ahasuerus. Recap: his plans were foiled by Mordechai, who was Ish Yemini, which literally means the right-handed guy or the right guy, which he was from the tribe of Benjamin. And we know Esther is Mordechai's cousin and adopted daughter, and she became the queen of Persia. After her marriage to Ahasuerus, Esther literally means hidden. So a lot of the story of Purim is about hidden meanings, hidden causes, hidden processes. For example, the day that Haman had planned to kill all the Jewish people, it actually became the day that he was killed, and it became a day of deliverance and celebrated with feasting and rejoicing among the Jews. So I'll talk about this in a little bit. There's a concept that's mentioned in the book of Esther called V'nahafochu, and it turned on itself. Things flipped over, and that's one of the major themes of the book of Esther and of the holiday. So Purim is celebrated. It's very interesting when you start reading the Talmud. Am I going too fast? Am I going too fast for you guys? There's just
Oh, it's good.
there's a lot. Oh, hi, Richard. I'm so glad you made it. Wow, and Scott. Oh, now I feel good. And Anthony. I'm
I'm a bit late. I'm sorry.
I'm surrounded by friends. I just because I'm so intense on my notes because there's so much about Purim. People think Purim is like this cute little holiday for kids, and Passover is the serious thing. And I realized after a while it's actually the opposite. Purim is for the adults, and we do the costumes and everything to get them out of the way. And Passover is all about the kids, telling them God brought me out of Egypt. And if they get that message, you've done your Passover. So if you have a question, either speak up or send the chat to Suzanne. Like I said, I'll be reading my notes. There's so much to get through. Okay, where was I? Okay, so when you read the Talmud of Megillah, which is about Purim, it starts out and say, when is Purim celebrated? And there's actually a whole long list of days that Purim can be celebrated or days associated with Purim. On the simple level, and it's said explicitly in the Megillat Esther, it's on the 14th day of Adar. Okay, this year is a leap year, so we're celebrating it in Adar Bet, the second Adar. A Hebrew leap year has an extra month of Adar. And the 13th of Adar is the fast of Esther, just like Esther fasted in order to prepare to save the Jewish people to meet with Hashverosh. We fast the day before Purim, but it's forbidden to fast on Shabbat because you're required to have meals on Shabbat. So the fast, if it's as it happens this year, the fast is not done on the 13th on Shabbat. It's actually done on the 11th on Thursday. So today was a fast day in preparation for Purim, which is on Motzei Shabbos, when Shabbos goes out. And in addition, if that isn't enough variety, there's also what's called Shushan Purim, which is we see that in the Megillah they say that the fight against the enemies of Israel went on for an additional day, and that was on the 15th of the month, and that's called Shushan Purim. So we learn the sages teach us that the 15th of Adar is an extra day of Purim that's observed in cities that had a wall in the days of Joshua, when he brought the Jews into Israel. So the only city that's absolutely definitely falls under that category is, of course, Jerusalem. Some cities they keep it also. Yafo, Akko, Hebron, even though they don't have walls today so much. And Tiberia. There's a dispute about that. Interestingly enough, another city that celebrates Shushan Purim on the 15th of Adar is Jericho. And there are a group of amazing Jews who go into the city of Jericho, which is infested these days, and they actually read the Megillah and celebrate Purim in Jericho, surrounded by Palestinians. It's an incredible thing. This year, as I said, Purim begins on Saturday night for most people, and in Jerusalem it'll be on Sunday night through Monday evening. Um, okay, so why do we call it Purim? Purim is actually an ancient Persian word. Pur means a lot, like a lottery, and it's mentioned in the book of Esther. That's describing how Haman chose the date. He threw dice, actually, basically. And when he came up with Adar, he was thrilled. He was thrilled because had somehow learned that that Moses passed away on the 7th of Adar. So he said, oh, it's a horrible month for Jews. What he didn't take into account was that Moses was also born on the 7th of Adar. So so that's another one of those cases was everything that looks horrible for the Jews is actually the source of our blessing. So that was another case of that. Adar, of course, is the last month of the Hebrew calendar. Um, and the Talmud teaches us that when Adar comes in, we are required to be joyful. And I have to tell you from experience that one of the hardest things is to be happy when you're supposed to. It's just I've seen so many dear people who, when Adar comes in, it's just hard for them to be happy, and especially this year, and it's very hard for Israel, and a lot of people in Israel are saying, folks, this year especially, we have to conquer the darkness. We have to take joy in the fact that it's Adar, that we are once again going to overcome the enemies. Even though Adar is often described as the month of darkness because of Haman, it's actually a month that we're supposed to be joyful in. And one of the reasons why Chazal, why the sages tell us to increase in joy in Adar, is because it's the entranceway into Nisan, into the month of Passover and Geula and the redemption. So on a certain level, Purim is the gateway to redemption. Um, and as I said, it's also a day for, well, there's a very deep Torah about how you do on, well, I'll get to that later. Okay. So there are four mitzvahs that we're required to do on Purim. The first one is reading the Megillah. We do it twice. We read it at night, and we read it again the next morning. It's preferable to read it in the synagogue because there's an expression, "Berov am hadrat hamelech." In the greatness of the nation is the king glorified. So for example, that's why it's preferable to, when you sit down for the Shabbos meal, one person does the kiddush for the whole table, because it's like all of us getting together and saying, yes, we all agree God is king, and it's a great thing. So it's better to read the scroll of Esther in a synagogue. And also, this is also evident in Hanukkah. We do what's called Pirsuma Nisa, which literally means advertising the miracle. An amazing thing happened to us on Purim, an amazing thing happened to us on Hanukkah, and we gotta let the world know. That's why we read the Megillah in public. The entire Megillah must be read from a kosher scroll. If you see a Megillah scroll, it's written on a parchment, the same as its Torah scroll. It's written by hand with a quill in a very special ink. And it's actually one of the first things a person who's learning how to be a scribe, it's the first thing they do, because it does not have the name of God in it. So if you make a mistake, it's not horrible. You can erase it. Uh, it's a real scroll, just like a Torah scroll. And when they read it, they actually fold it, because Ahasuerus, he sent out letters, and that's how you treat letters. You fold them, and when you finish reading, you roll it up like a Torah scroll. There's a special cantillation, special notes that are sung. There's a specific way to sing the Megillah. There are four verses of redemption in the Megillah that are read in a louder voice, and every word must be clearly heard. That's actually kind of difficult, because we know that there's a tradition to make noise when the name of Haman is read. That's because the name Haman was an Amalekite, and this is our way of wiping out the memory of Amalek, is by making noise when his name is read. But at the same time, every single word must be clearly heard in order. So even though we're wiping out the name of Haman, the tradition is to, as soon as they read it out, you make the noise, and then after the noise is finished, you go back, you read the name Haman again, and you continue reading. You have to hear every single word. Okay. And as I said, you have to wipe out the remembrance of Amalek. But the Shabbat before Purim is called Shabbat Zachor, the Shabbat of remembrance, because we read an extra portion of the Torah called the Maftir, and in it we learn the mitzvah to remember Amalek. There's a strange dichotomy with Amalek, that we have to wipe out his name and we also have to remember him. There's a lot to be learned there. We're not going to go into that today, but Amalek is is problematic on many levels. So we talked about the first mitzvah is of Purim is reading the Megillah. The second mitzvah is mishloach manot ish l're'ehu. Mishloach is sending out. Manot are portions. So there's a mitzvah, not a tradition, but an actual mitzvah that you send food to other people. It has to be at least 2 items of food to at least one person. It's not 2 items to do different people. It's at least 2 items to one person. And of course, you can send 2 items of food to more than one person. It's preferable to send, and also we have a tradition to also to, there are halachic opinions that say it should be 2 different blessings, foods that require 2 different blessings. Okay. The 2 different, so for example, wine and bread, 2 different blessings. Fruit and a piece of cake, they're 2 different blessings. And it's also preferable to send out ready-to-eat foods that they don't. So even like, how do you say menachama? Noodles in a cup, soup in a cup. That's not ready to eat. So and one of the reasons is you want to ensure that everyone has a Purim feast, which is another mitzvah that we're all required to do on Purim. So you want to make sure that every person can do the Purim feast. Another reason is because we learned in the story of Purim that all the Jews were in this together. So we have to love each other. And there is, of course, a mitzvah to love each other. And I say Jews, but I of course mean, we're all in this together. And it's funny, this class is a group of people who I've gotten to know who I love you guys anyway. So even if I'm commanded, even if I'm not commanded, you guys are great guys. Okay, so the Mishloach Manot are meant to increase love and friendship between people. And there's an interesting halacha, there's an interesting law that as long as the person who gives it to you observes Shabbat, you have to accept it without questioning whether it's kosher or not. There are a lot of people, they're very specific. I eat this level of kashrut. I only eat from this rabbi giving the kashrut. And that's forbidden on the Mishloach Manot on Purim. You have to accept from everyone because this mitzvah is meant to bring us together and not to separate us. And another reason is Haman did not discriminate between Jews. He said, all the Jews, I don't care who they are, what they do, whether they're observant Jews or not observant Jews, they're all going to be dead. And the Nazis were the same way. They lumped all the Jews in a basket. If you had a Jewish grandparent, you went to the camps. So we have to overcome that by loving each other. It's also an amazing opportunity to connect with people you might not have had a great connection with. Maybe you argued with them, so you can make up. You can show up at their door with a nice basket of food, and hopefully mend that bridge. Also, if someone's new in the community, it's a special thing to give them mishloach manot, because that brings them into the community and bonds with them. There is a mitzvah also to send the mishloach manot, send the food via a third person. One of the reasons, and that's from Esther chapter 9, verse 22, where they were sending food packages to one another, implying that someone was taking it to the other person. It's also a way of bringing more people into the mitzvah and making the mitzvah even greater and making the amazing story of Purim known to more people. The third mitzvah is matanot le'evyonim, which means gifts to poor people. It's always a mitzvah to help out poor people, especially poor people from your town. But it's a special mitzvah to give money to at least 2 poor people on Purim. Each person should be given at least the amount of money to purchase a food that's eaten at a regular meal. Um, and there's even a phrase, Kol poshet yado, anyone who stretches out their hand is given money on Purim. As I said, uh, um, charity is always an amazing thing, but it is especially so on Purim. The fourth mitzvah, the final mitzvah of Purim, is the Purim Seudah, a feast. And Purim is actually even more than other holidays. Purim is the eat, drink, and be merry holiday. We have a saying, what are Jewish holidays? They tried to kill us, they failed miserably, they're gone, we're around, let's eat. And Purim is the classic case of that. Um, and the Purim feast should begin during the daytime, and it should instead extend until after dark. Purim is actually a very busy day because you wake up in the morning, you run to go pray and to go listen to the Megillah. You run back home, you start packing up the mishloach manot, the food baskets to send to your friends, and then you got to run to get together the Purim Seudah, the feast. It's a busy day. It's not just go to a party day. Um, it's fortunate Purim is, since it's not a biblically mandated holiday and it's not one of the feasts, it's not like Shabbat. So actions that are forbidden on the feasts and on the holidays, they're permitted on Purim. You can turn lights on and off, you can drive, it's just a normal day on that level. Though some halachic opinions say you really shouldn't go to work, and you shouldn't treat it as a normal day. And once you start doing Purim, it clearly won't be. It's a very special day, and as I said, a very busy day. There's also another thing is during the prayers in the morning. Um, One thing that makes Purim very special is something we don't do. We do not read Hallel. Hallel is a collection of 6 psalms, 6 Tehillim. They're read in synagogues on festive occasions, and they're also read especially on occasions when Jews are redeemed from troubles and danger. Rashi tells us that this is based on Shirat Hayam. When the Jews passed through the sea and they were through the Red Sea and they were saved, they sang. So when we're saved, we should sing to God. And the Hallel is based on that. And it was sung on the 3 pilgrimage festivals, the feasts, when the sacrifices were offered. And interestingly enough, Hallel is also read on every day of Hanukkah, but it's not read on Purim. And there's a big question, why wouldn't you read Hallel on Purim? Purim is we were saved, so we should read it. Well, the Gemara explains, and the Gemara says that there are 3 reasons why Hallel is not read on Purim. First of all, Purim took place outside of Israel. Uh, it's the only holiday that really has no connection with Israel. Had no and It kind of does, though, and I'll tell you why. Because the initial feast that Ahasuerus had, he served it on the temple vessels that he had taken away from Jerusalem. But other than that, there's no real connection to the land of Israel, so we don't sing Hallel. And also there's an opinion which says that reading the Megillah, even though it doesn't have the name of God in it, it's what they call a hidden Hallel. And Purim, even though it doesn't have anything in it uh, that that transcends the laws of nature, Purim itself is a hidden miracle. There's some people who would say that if the Jews stood up for themselves, that's actually a miracle unto itself. And Until recently, that was probably accurate. We've learned in the land of Israel to stand up for ourselves. In Purim, I mean, I always read it. I'm like, what did Mordechai and Esther, what did Achashverosh actually give the Jews? He gave them the right to self-defense. He maybe even woke them up to self-defense. But that self-defense, that salvation came through our hands, not through any miracle that transcended nature. So there was a hidden miracle in Purim. I had someone who taught me that in Hanukkah, there was a hidden miracle and a revealed miracle. In Hanukkah, there was a miracle that was hidden and revealed, and a miracle that was revealed and hidden. The oil was a revealed miracle because it was clearly a miracle, it transcended nature, but it was hidden because no one saw it. It was inside the temple. The military victory was hidden and revealed. It was hidden because it was not transcending nature, but it was revealed because everyone saw it. Purim, everything is hidden. Everything is hidden. And even the fact that that the victory was a miracle, that was hidden. Okay, so
Eliyahu, we have a question
sure.
about
I'm
the
sorry.
Mishloach Manot.
Oh yeah. Okay. I'm sorry.
Uh,
Like I said, I'm looking at my
no worries. So Scott asks, do you trade baskets with known neighbors, or do you seek out people that you don't know yet to gift a basket?
um
I like that
yes,
question.
yes, both and both. And also I should say there's two methodologies. There's and it's glorious to watch it take place in the town. There are people, I remember the first time someone actually gave me like a lasagna made with sun-dried tomatoes and pesto, and he gave me a bottle of like Merlot. And I was like, whoa. And he said, like, it should be for your Purim Seudah. And I want you to have a nice Purim Seudah. And I was like, wow. That's one methodology. And there's a side to say it's the more proper one. The other methodology, and it's beautiful to see, you think baby carriages are for people who have babies? No. You sit in our town, you see the people, you buy all the Bamba, all the chocolate, all the cheap, nasty stuff that your parents never let you eat all year long, and you just fill up these big plastic bowls with it covered in colorful plastic, and you just load up like 50 of them on the baby carriage and walk around handing them out. And then the big secret that everyone knows is when you start getting those baskets into your house, you spread them out on the kitchen table, you start rearranging them, and then you find the good stuff that you want to keep, and and you start rearranging it, and you send it out to more people. So that's the big thing. And then you'll be sitting at home, you'll be like, wait, didn't I send this out an hour ago to my neighbors down the street? So it's beautiful, and the kids, God bless them, they love it. But like I said, there's two methodologies. One is quantity, one is quality. I mean, I want to do quality and quantity, but you got to find your sweet spot. You got to find what works for you. So since it's intended to bring people together, I guess there's a question there. I'm not sure which way I would answer that. But it's certainly, I mean, if you see a person, you're like, wow, I bet they want to be brought in. I bet they want to have a friend. It would be a nice thing to send it to them. It's a beautiful thing, giving someone food. And yeah, yeah. So I don't know how to answer. Um, okay. And the third reason why we don't read Hallel on Purim is because, gosh, I'll answer. I want to explain this with a non-Purim story. I remember once on Tisha B'av, I spent Tisha B'av. I went into Jerusalem as soon as Tisha B'av came in, because you can travel on Tisha B'av on the 9th of Av, and I spent 24 hours, 25 hours at the Kotel, sleeping on the rocks. It was so hard. It was so difficult. When the day was over, I was done. Um, but the hardest part about it was that when it was over, nothing was fixed. And the same is really true of the Purim story. When it's over, the Jews were still in Galut, the Jews were still in exile. Hashverosh got rid of Haman, but he brought in another guy, according to the sources, who was just as bad. Nothing stopped. There was still anti-Semitism and we were still in the exile. That's why we read it on Hanukkah. Things changed. The temple service came back. We were in the land of Israel. We were free. So there's a very strong side that so that's why um, we don't read Hallel on Purim. Um, and it's very important when we celebrate Purim to remember we're not celebrating the death of our enemies. We're celebrating because we were saved. Um, and there's a big difference. Jews do not celebrate excuse me when I use the term Jews. I mean everyone here who is celebrating. Um, God bless you, but I'm speaking from as a Jew. So we don't, and it actually is, there is a midrash that after the Jews went through the sea, the angels were celebrating, and Hashem, God said to them, no, 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 no. The Egyptians were my children too. So we don't celebrate at the fall of our enemies. We celebrate that we're still around to glorify God. Um, the book of Esther is the only book in the Bible that does not contain the name of God. Um, the only oblique reference is when Mordecai says to Esther, hey, if you don't act, well, Revach Hatzalah mimakom acher. The salvation will come from some other place. And makom is another as a euphemism for God. So the place. So it's an oblique reference. Also, by the way, the only time in the Bible that the Jews are referred to as a religion or a system of belief is when Haman asks, why is the belief of this people, is their belief different than everyone else's belief? So when people call Jews a religion, when they say Judaism is a religion, it actually really hurts me because I'm like, no, no, the only person who calls us that is someone who wants us to wipe us out. Um, we are not a religion. We are a people. We are a nation. We're Am Yisrael. That's the only way we're referred to in the entire Bible. Um, so another important message that being learned from the story is that God works in ways that are hidden, in ways that appear to be chance. Um, Poor, the lottery. And you can call it coincidence, you can call it good luck. And also God hides in nature. You can say, oh, I'm glad this rain came to save my field. Well, where do you think the rain came from? But it's God. But it's God did this amazing thing where he made it possible to seem as if he was not there. When he created the world, he did, according to Kabbalah, he made an halal panui, a place that appeared to be empty of him. But we also know, Malok Eretz Kvodo, that the entire world is filled with Hashem. It could not exist. Nothing in reality can exist for even a moment without the essence of God in it. So to make it appear as if the story of Purim happened without God is an astounding thing for God to do. And there has to be a reason why he made it seem as if he was not there. Another aspect, we spoke about Hallel. When you pray the Shemona Esrei, the 19, 18, 19 blessing prayer that we do 3 times a day, and also in Birkat Hamazon, the grace after meals, there's an addition of Al Hanisim, mean on the miracles, which is kind of ironic that we added on Purim since there was no nace, there was no miracle. There's also it's congruent to the addition that we add on Hanukkah, where there were miracles. So you add that in the Amida prayer on the Shemona Esrei, the 18 benedictions, and you also add it in the benching after the meals. There's also a concept which I mentioned before. It's mentioned specifically in the book of Esther, v'nahafochu. It's in Esther 9:1. Um, and so on the 13th day of the 12th month, that is the month of Adar, when the king's command and decree were to be executed, the very day on which the enemies of the Hudim had expected to get them in their power, the opposite happened. and the Yehudim got their enemies in their power. That's Esther 9:1. And I just when I was rereading that, I had this image in my mind of Haman standing there with the rope, the noose around his neck on the gallows that he built. And he's like, wow, I hope this rope breaks. And the guy who's putting the rope, oh no, you built it. You built really good gallows with really strong, extra strong ropes. And there's no way this is gonna break. So that's the nahafochu. That the absolute the downfall of the enemies comes from what they did. Their own actions are turned against them. And that's a huge lesson for today, for these days in which we're living. We see so many enemies of Israel, but that they're not going to overcome Israel is for sure. The question is not what, the question is when and how. And the how is going to be exactly what you don't expect, and certainly what they didn't expect. And I also want to point out there's something really amazing. If you want to find, you can go to the tomb of Mordechai and Esther. And where is it? It's in Shushan. Where is that? That's in Iran. Okay. And we see Haman, yeah, sure. But Persia was also the source of the Second Temple. Darius. And I'm looking at what's happening with Iran today. They're building a nuclear bomb to attack Israel. But you know something? That can, even from a practical political sense, if Iran falls, all of the enemies of Israel disappear. They disappear. I live in the Golan. Everyone's, oh, Syria, oh, Syria. Syria's gone. It's history. Okay. If Iran falls, Hamas maybe has a week's worth of funds to attack Israel. Hezbollah, the same thing. Hezbollah without money, the people in Lebanon would eat them alive. The Houthis, they're gone. Okay, it can turn over in one moment. It's so clear that it can. And the source of their and that could become, and I hear actually that there's a huge Christian revival going on in Iran. And if they overturn the Iranian Islamist regime, they actually the Persians I've met, the Iranians I've met, love Israel. That could be the source of the third temple. Um, before I go on, I've been going really fast, covering a lot of stuff. Are there any questions? Questions? Richard?
Currently not in the comments. but-
Okay. Okay, I'm going to keep blasting through. It's like I decided to do Purim for the first lesson. Purim, as you can see, it's really complicated, and there's a lot to it. And I haven't even gotten into any Hasidut or esoteric or anything. This is just the straight simple stuff. Okay, there's a custom on Purim to wear costumes. You should know this custom it's not mentioned in the Gemara, the Midrash, or even the later sources. It's actually relatively recent. They believe it started in Italy around 500 years ago, but it's a custom not only for the children. Adults also dress up. So if you have this urge to dress up, go with it. And the reason why you dress up, there's a lot of reasons. It's a very deep thing. I've heard it's because you want to confuse the dark side. He'll come around and be like, "Where's Elio? Where's Elio?" And I'll be sitting there dressed up, and he'll look at me, "Where's Elio?" And I'm like, "Oh, I saw him go over there." So you can fool the dark side by dressing up, by being in camouflage, undercover. And actually, that's part of the story of Purim. Esther, she concealed her Jewish identity. She was undercover. Mordecai also, he hid his identity. Um, and so that's one of the reasons we dress up. Also, we see that there, according to the Midrashim, a lot of Jews dressed up as Gentiles when the decree came out. But when the decree was reversed, a lot of Gentiles, a lot of the enemies of Israel dressed up as Jews to save themselves. So in remembrance of this miracle, we also dress up and change our clothes. Also, we see clothes wearing the wrong clothes, wearing different clothes is a very essential part of the story. Um, so much so that Haman, when he was asked by the king, how should I honor a person? He's like, clothes. I'm thinking Lamborghini or something like that. But no, he said, dress him in the king's clothes. Clothing is very important. And there's also so Mordechai, he wore Bigdei Malchut, the clothing of the king, when he went through the streets of Shushan. And there's also Midrash that Hashverosh, when he threw the party, not only did he have all the food served and the food and wine served in the vessels of the temple, he himself wore the clothing of the Kohen Gadol, of the high priest, even though he was not a priest. So the clothes play a very important role in that story, even in the culture where they thought of clothes as the thing that identified who you were. So we use that power against the dark side. And we're also at the same time kind of making fun of Hashverosh and Haman. We're like, oh, clothes are so important. We're like, are they? Are they? I can wear any clothes I want. So there's a very deep thing about wearing a costume. Also, I wanted to mention another tradition, a holiday tradition. My son, this year's my mom, she made Aliyah a couple years ago. This year, she decided to rent a house. She stays like 6 months out of the year in Israel. So this year, she decided rather than go to Tel Aviv because of the war and also because for a lot of reasons, she rented a house right down the block from me. And for the first time in his life, my son Amitai, who's 11 years old, baked Hamantaschen with his grandma. And for those who don't know, um, Hamantaschen are triangles that are filled with sweet stuff. Triangles of dough filled with sweet stuff, and they call them actually in Hebrew Oznei Haman, which means Haman ears. And it's supposedly Haman had triangular ears, though I think that's just to justify eating those delicious yummy cakes. We started seeing them like right after Hanukkah. They started baking them in the supermarket. We're getting ready for Purim. And this year in Israel, Israelis are getting a kick out of calling them Ozne Sinwar, the ears of Sinwar. Sinwar is the head of Hamas, and he actually has really big ears. So people are baking them and calling them Ozne Sinwar. So if you want to have an especially good time with that this year, you can do that. There's also just a few small points. There's in the Megillat Esther, um, oh gosh, did I keep the verse? I hope I kept the verse. It says in chapter 9, verse 27, just a moment, it's loading. Chapter 9, verse 27, it says the Yehudim undertook and irrevocably obligated themselves and their descendants and all who might join them to observe these 2 days in the manner prescribed and in the proper time each year. In Hebrew, it's kaimu v'kiblu. They received it and they did it. They performed it. And the Gemara says something very interesting. When we talk about Shavuot, we talk about receiving the Torah, which is not actually true. It's actually Matan Torah. On Shavuot, God gave us the Torah. And in the Midrash in the Gemara, they talk about um, the verse says that when we went to Sinai for God to give us the Torah, the Jews stood betachtit hahar, which could be understood to mean at the base of the mountain, but it literally means they stood under the mountain. So according to the Midrash, when we went to receive the Torah, God held up the all of Mount Sinai over our heads, and he said, "Okay, I have this Torah thing. Are you going to accept it? Because if you don't, I'm kind of feeling an itch over here that I've got to scratch and my fingers are feeling slippery. Because if you don't receive it, I'll drop the mountain and that'll be the end of you here. And it actually goes on to say that, and there are the reasons for it in the verses, to say that had the Jews not accepted the Torah, the entire world would have been returned to the pre-creative state of tohu vavohu, of, I don't know, how do you say that, tohu vavohu, craziness, um, if we had not received the Torah. And I say that because it's very clearly true. It's very clearly true that without the Torah, we would be lost. So God gave us the Torah under duress at Sinai. But from this verse in Megillat Esther, the Jews did it and they received it. So we say that Mount Sinai was giving the Torah, and on Purim, the Jews voluntarily, willingly received the Torah. That's when we opened their hands and said, yes. And it's very interesting that it happened on Purim, outside of Israel. I mean, Mount Sinai was outside of Israel too, but it was in the exile. There's a lot there that I absolutely don't understand, but there it is. Okay, that's Kaimuva Kiblu. Okay. So there's one thing that I wanted to touch on. That's a difficult subject to deal with. And I wonder how people who were not raised religious or raised Jewish see this from the outside. There is actually, in the Gemara, it tells us that we are to drink on Purim, drink wine, ade lo yada, until you don't know the difference between cursed is Haman and blessed is Mordecai. There's a lot of, when you say something like that, the simple reading is, okay, get plastered, get blackout drunk. And it's funny that a lot of people are like, just do the simple mitzvah. As soon as they hear that, they're like, well, it doesn't really mean that. It means you should have, half a cup of wine or a tiny bit more than you're used to, or you should drink until you feel sleepy. The simple reading is you should drink until you're blackout drunk, and you can't tell the difference between right or left or black and white. You're just blackout drunk. And that's ade lo yada, until you don't know. I've heard a deeper interpretation of that we should drink until we don't know, because, as I said, Yom Kippur is like Purim, because in Yom Kippur, you have a little bit of strength to do tshuva. So you do tshuva, you repent for the things you know about. But in Purim, you get blackout drunk so you can repent on the things that you don't know about, on the things you don't know how to fix, on the things that are too big for you. So you get blackout drunk. That's already an interpretation. But that very same Gemara that talks about drinking wine ade lo yada, until you can't tell the difference, it goes on and it gives over this really weird story. The rabbi Rava, who taught that, he had a Purim feast and he got so drunk that he had a guest, Rav Ze'era, and he chopped off Rav Ze'era's head. He was so drunk, that's what he did. Well, a miracle happened and Rav Ze'era came back to life. Well, the next year, Rava invited Rav Zera to another Purim feast. He's like, come on back. And Rav Zera remembered what happened, and he said, miracles don't happen all the time, so I think I'll take a pass. Okay, so there's an interesting thing. Rava also taught in a different place in the Gemara in Sanhedrin that nichnas yain yotze sod. When wine goes in, secrets come out. So drinking on Purim, it's really up to you. When I was in yeshiva and I was very much younger, we would, I guess there were like 40, 50 guys in the yeshiva. We would go to the rabbi's house. His wife would set the table. We'd have our Purim feast. And I'm not exaggerating. At the end of the feast, they literally brought in the garden hose to clean up the dining room. It was bad. You have a lot of young men who are very restrained all year long, and they start drinking and they say it's a mitzvah. And and I remember watching my rabbi himself. He was sitting there on Purim, sitting at the table, and he's talking to the parents of one of the students. And as he's talking to them, he's eating chicken legs and throwing the bones on the floor. It was, I mean, and I can't, the stories I can tell you, like there was a rabbi, he stood on a chair on one leg, balanced a bottle of wine on his head, and he said, I am a nun. I am the letter nun. And he spoke for an hour about the letter nun. My first Purim feast, I decided I was going to fix all those years that I was a biker. So I put on my leathers and dressed up as a biker and put in my earrings, and I literally sat in the corner and cried for 4 hours. That's the one thing a biker does not do, is cry. Um, so many amazing things. There was one time when the entire yeshiva ended up in front of the rabbi's house in the sandbox, and the Torahs that were given over. I mean, my gosh, if I could remember them this day. So wine can take you to a different place. It will take you to a different place. And apparently there's a tradition, and I know very strongly Hasidic Jews, especially, really take it to the limit. And from the outside, it looks kind of horrifying. And not everyone can do it with proper intention. It can really go to a horrible place. I mean, I remember one year there was this guy who was an amazing craftsman, and he made this grogger, the noisemaker, out of wood, handmade, amazing. And someone took it and smashed it on the table. And he came up to him after Purim and he's like, you did this, and that was going to be an heirloom for my kids. And the guy was like, I don't even remember it. So it's a very difficult aspect of Purim. If you see it, you should know that most of the people, you should at least give them the benefit of the doubt, kafzchut, and try to see that they're trying to go to a very deep place. And it's not just accidental that the Gemara said that you can't tell the difference between blessed is Mordechai and cursed is Haman, because we have a midrash that says that Haman's grandchildren learned Torah in Bnei Brak, that they became very religious Jews. And in this world, we see that you can't. We don't know. We don't see the whole picture. And there's some very very deep aspects. So it's done. It's a very strong tradition. There are different opinions about it. Not everyone does it with the purest intentions, but some people certainly do. I personally stopped drinking 7 years ago because I did it with absolute intention. Some of the deepest stories I know are what happened on Purim. But my daughter, who was 17 at the time, walked up, or 16, 15 at the time. She walked up to me after Purim. She said, Abba, I came home and I listened to you in the bathroom for 2 hours. And she said, I can't handle that anymore. So I'm like, okay. And that was the last Purim I drank. And I miss it. I miss it. It can be a very deep transformational experience, especially if you're with the right people. Um, so there it is. If you see it happening, it looks horrifying, but it can be that the people who are going through it are having an incredibly deep experience. Really, I would even say holy. So Yeah, there's another really weird thing I saw. I said that Purim is connected to Yom Kippur. It's all it's also, and I said it's the entranceway into Passover. When you learn the Mishnahs of Pesach, a lot of it has to do with cleaning the house for Pesach. And they talk about a little animal called a chuldah that you'll be searching your basement, it's totally clean, and then all of a sudden in the corner that you already cleaned, you find a loaf of bread. They say, oh, an animal took it there, and they say that that's a euphemism for a little kid. Okay, then your little 3-year-old went crawling down there with a bag of pretzels. You go from I got married in between Purim and Pesach, and they're two totally opposite energies. Purim is wild, unrestrained joy. Both holidays, you have a feast where you drink a lot of wine. Also on Passover, you have to drink 4 cups, and they can be pretty big cups of wine. Um, so they look the same on one level, but they're very different energies. Seder literally means order. Things are ordered. Passover, everything is, perfectly in place. Everything, you have an order to do things. But you drink 4 cups and you have a feast. And I always have this image of, like, cleaning cleaning my house and finding, this roll in some, like, in the attic on the or on the top of my roof. I see a loaf of bread, and I remember that on Purim I climbed to the top of roof and put the loaf of bread there. They're two very opposite energies, even though in many ways they're connected. There's also, strangely enough, a connection, and actually, when you think about it, not so strangely enough, between Purim and the Holocaust. In the book of Esther, Haman was hanged with his 10 sons. In 1946, 10 of Hitler's top associates were put to death by hanging for their war crimes. And an 11th one, Hermann Goering, committed suicide the night before the execution, which it's interesting that we have, according to the Midrash, Haman's daughter um, was committed suicide before her brothers were killed. So there is that strange parallel between the Holocaust and it's also nahafochu. It's flipping things around. And that's the Shoah, the Holocaust, and Purim. There's also rumors that Hermann Goering was a transvestite. So you also have the issue of dressing up. Um, and it's also said that one of the men who was executed, one of the Nazis, Julius Streicher, um, he shouted out, and I do not understand this. He shouted out Purim Fest 1946. So I can't figure it out. Why would he say that? I don't know, but he yelled it out. Um, so yeah, they were hung on Hoshana Rabbah, which is another Jewish festival. And also there's a crazy story that in 1953, in the Soviet Union, Stalin was planning to deport most of the Jews in the Soviet Union to Siberia. But just before it happened, just before he was about to do it, he suffered a stroke and died a few days later. And when did he have the stroke? On March 1st, 1953, which was the night after Purim. So because Stalin had a stroke the day after Purim, the Jews were not deported in the Soviet Union. So, as I said, Purim is really the deepest, and it's an energy that it's something that keeps coming back and back on itself. And the Gemara says that after the Mashiach, no, all of the korbanot, all of the sacrifices will be canceled out, except for the Korban Todah. And what are the Korban Todah? Well, it's the ones we bring on Purim and Hanukkah. So in the days after Mashiach, we won't be bringing sacrifices on Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, Sukkot. We will be bringing sacrifices on Purim and Hanukkah, which is a kind of crazy thing. And did I talk about the Hagralah, the Yom Kippur sacrifice with the two goats? Did I talk about? Okay. And the other connection that I should have mentioned between Purim and Yom Kippur is we know Purim is because of the lottery, the dice that Haman shook. And I said there's a connection to Yom Kippurim, Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, which you think is the most, in the temple, it was like the most organized, set day. Everything was planned, everything was set up. But what's the center of the focus of the Yom Kippur sacrifice? You have the Kohen Gadol in his beautiful clothes. They bring in two perfectly identical goats. He takes two things, shakes them up. One. One is Kodesh LaHashem, sanctified to God, and that goat is sacrificed in the temple according to all the rules. The other one, it says Lazazel, he's taken out way, way outside, further than you're actually permitted to walk on Yom Kippur. And he's thrown out, and on the way, the person who's taking him is offered food and drink on Yom Kippur. And he gets outside and they throw the goat off the cliff. And he just gets ripped to pieces on the rocks. And the red wool is like, oh, it turns white because that's the one that does the kapara, that atones for Israel, not the one that followed all the rules. And that ceremony of the two goats, it's called Hagralah, which is actually the term they use today for a lottery. Because it's a chance, it's chance, this one or that one. But the word Hagralah comes from the word goral, which means destiny or fate. And I think if you put Yom Kippur and Yom Purim together, you get a very interesting picture of how things work out in the world. On one hand, Hashem knows everything, and we know where everything's going to go. But reality has an appearance of happenstance, of luck, of arbitrary. But that arbitrary, it's kind of like you have a little input, but you don't. So the question is, what is the nature of our reality as creatures of choice, of free choice? And I think in order to do that, you have to look at both Purim and Yom Kippur, where yes, it's it's a pour, it's a lottery, it's a throw of the dice. But you throw the dice and you think, haha, snake eyes, I won. Well, maybe you didn't. Maybe but what you thought was a win was actually a loss. And it's all Hashem. So that's how I think you can see Yom Kippur and Yom Purim together give us a very confusing but deep insight into the crazy thing we call life and reality. Is it chance? Do I have choice? What does having choice mean? What does having choice and attaching to God mean? How do I serve God in this crazy whirlwind of possibility, probability, chance? Is it fate? Is it destiny? Or is it just the throw of the dice? So as usually, I always get confused and don't give answers. But I really appreciate that you were all here. I hope you got something from it. I hope you have an amazingly happy Purim. I'm going to be, I'm planning. We plan, God laughs, and sometimes he even messes with us. Um, Next week is Parshas Para. It's the um, the week of the red heifer. And it just so happens that next Wednesday, I'm going to be going to Shiloh for a conference on the red heifer. And Shiloh is where the red heifers are being kept. So hopefully I'll have some videos of the cute little moo-moos. Um, I'm going to be giving a class next week, God willing. And unless the dice get thrown differently. And it'll be about the red heifer. So if you have any questions or preferences, please contact me. You all know how to contact me either through my Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz Facebook page or through my Wrestling the Angel Facebook page. I'm posting videos uh, that I think are pretty cool. So I'll be posting a video about the moo So you can follow the videos. A lot of people are. I'm very pleasantly surprised at that. Um, yeah, and we'll be in touch. Suzanne, do we have any final statements?
No final questions there, although I would mention the Patreon briefly.
All right, we have started a Patreon thing. It's going to be tiered for subscriptions. Right now, there's going to be offered a subscription to some videos. The classes are going to be videotaped, but and I'm going to be adding more classes. Right now, I'm starting out easy, starting with learning Torah, learning about the Chagim, the festivals. I'm actually hoping one day to start up learning New Testament with a Christian who I trust and love. I'm also going to be doing stuff like this, the webinars for my fiction, reading my fiction, fiction that I've written and fiction that is in the works that I'm working on, and also hopefully helping other people to unleash their hidden superpower of writing fiction. So there's going to be a lot of different things. We're adding things gradually. We make sure it doesn't crash and burn, and then we move on to the next aspect. So I appreciate that you guys helped me get this off the ground. I had a blast. It certainly is going to have a big impact on my forum. I guess that's it. Thank you all so much. Have an absolutely amazing Purim.